My husband accused me of cheating in front of 30 guests at my baby's gender reveal, but when I checked our bank accounts, I discovered he and his sister stole $50K to cover up fraud, and now they both face prison. I'm 29 years old, I'm 5 months pregnant, I have a 6-year-old son, and 3 weeks ago, my life basically exploded in the most humiliating and twisted way you can imagine. I'm living with my parents now, in the middle of a divorce, and I still can't believe any of this is real. The thing is, I thought I had a solid marriage. You know, one of those that aren't perfect but work. And it turns out my husband and his sister had been planning for months how to destroy me to cover up their own crimes. Yes, you read that right, crimes. Because what they did wasn't just emotional betrayal, it was literal fraud and theft. But let me start from the beginning, because otherwise you won't understand the magnitude of this insanity. Christopher and I had been married for 7 years when all this happened. We met in college, he studied finance and I worked in marketing, and honestly, he seemed like a good guy. Responsible, dedicated, the kind of person you trust with your eyes closed. We got married young, had Noah when I was 23, and even though we weren't rich or anything like that, we were fine, comfortable, building a life together. Christopher always handled the household finances because supposedly that was his area of expertise, and I trusted him completely. Like I didn't even check the accounts because I assumed everything was under control. How stupid I was. Seriously. Jennifer, his sister, was always kind of intense, but I tried to get along with her because, well, she was my sister-in-law, and Christopher adored her. She was like 31 years old, worked in something related to sales or consulting. I never really understood what she did exactly, but she was always bragging about her professional successes and how incredibly well she was doing in business. She had a partner, Michael, with whom she supposedly ran this business consulting firm, and from what I knew, everything was going great. Christopher and Jennifer were always very close, which seemed normal to me at first, siblings who get along well and support each other. But looking back, I should have noticed there was something weird about the way they whispered things to each other when they thought I wasn't paying attention. Everything started to change about 6 months ago, when Jennifer showed up at our door on a Friday night with 2 suitcases and crying her eyes out. Christopher told me we needed to talk and explained that Jennifer had had a horrible breakup with Michael, that he had cheated on her, or something like that, and that she needed a place to stay for a few weeks while she found a new apartment. I was 2 months pregnant at that moment, and honestly, I wasn't thrilled about the idea of having someone else living with us, but Christopher made me feel guilty saying things like, "She's my sister. She's devastated. We can't abandon her." And I gave in because, well, what was I going to do? Tell someone in crisis? No. Jennifer settled into the guest room, and what was supposed to be 2 weeks turned into weeks and weeks with no plan to leave. Living together was uncomfortable. I'm not going to lie. Jennifer was always there, in the living room, in the kitchen, butting into conversations between Christopher and me, giving opinions about how to raise Noah, commenting on my pregnancy like she was a doctor or something. But what bothered me most was that Christopher and she spent a ton of time together, locking themselves in his office, supposedly so she could help him with work or so he could advise her about her job situation. I gave them their space because I thought, well, they're dealing with the drama with Michael and the company. It's normal they need to talk. But something in my gut told me there was something weird. One night, I asked Christopher when Jennifer was going to look for her own place, and he got upset. He told me I was being insensitive and that his sister needed our support. So I shut up and went on with my life, trying to ignore that feeling of discomfort that grew every day. We decided to throw a party to announce the baby's sex in April, like 3 months after Jennifer moved in with us. I was excited, We were going to reveal it was a girl in front of all our family and close friends. We had the cake prepared and everything decorated at our house. My parents came, Christopher's parents, my brother, some cousins, work friends, like 30 people total. Noah was super happy running around with the other kids, and I felt good despite the pregnancy, nausea, and tiredness. There was something weird about Christopher's energy that afternoon. I noticed him nervous, and Jennifer had this strange expression on her face, like a fake smile mixed with something I couldn't identify, but I attributed it to nerves about the reveal. The time came to cut the cake, and everyone was gathered in the living room with their phones ready to record. Christopher gave me a hug and then pulled away, took the microphone we had connected to the speakers for the announcement, and said, "Well, family and friends, Before we reveal the baby's sex, there's something that Hannah and I need to clarify. I looked at him confused because we hadn't planned any extra speech, and then Jennifer stood next to him with an expression that I can now identify as malicious satisfaction. Christopher took a deep breath and said, "The baby Hannah is expecting isn't mine. She cheated on me with her coworker, and you all deserve to know the truth." I swear. Time stopped. Everyone went silent, staring at me, and I couldn't process what I had just heard. I started laughing because I thought it was a bad joke, like some stupid TikTok trend or something. But nobody else was laughing. Jennifer added in a theatrical voice, "Yes, we found the messages, the photos, everything. Hannah has been lying to all of you, and Christopher deserves support in this difficult time." I felt like someone had thrown a bucket of ice water on me. My hands started shaking, and I tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. My mom yelled something like, "This can't be true." And Christopher's dad came over to console his son, who was suddenly acting like a devastated victim. I managed to articulate "This is a lie. Christopher, what the hell are you doing?" But he looked at me with this fake, disappointed face, and Jennifer shook her head as if to say, "Poor thing. She keeps lying." My friends looked at me with a mixture of shock and horror. Some were already taking out their phones to leave because the discomfort was unbearable, and I just wanted the earth to swallow me. Noah came up to me crying because he felt the tension and didn't understand what was happening, and I hugged him, feeling like my heart was going to jump out of my chest. I told Christopher through tears, "You know this isn't true. Why are you doing this?" And he just repeated like a rehearsed robot, "I have the proof, Hannah. Stop lying in front of everyone." I don't remember well how I managed to get out of there, but I took Noah by the hand, grabbed my purse and keys, and left my own house while hearing the chaos of voices behind me. Some were yelling at me to stop, others were asking Christopher about the supposed proof, and I just ran to my car with Noah crying beside me asking, "Mommy, why is Daddy angry?" I drove aimlessly for like half an hour until I calmed down enough to think clearly and ended up at a hotel near downtown because I couldn't go back to that house and didn't want to involve my parents yet without understanding what was happening. That night at the hotel was one of the worst of my life. Noah finally fell asleep after I made up some excuse about Daddy and I having a silly argument. But I didn't sleep a wink. My phone was exploding with messages, some supportive from my closest friends saying they knew it was a lie, others from confused relatives asking what had really happened, and several from numbers I didn't know, insulting me because someone had shared what happened. On social media, I tried calling Christopher like 5 times, but he didn't answer, and Jennifer sent me a message that said, "Don't make this harder, Hannah. Accept the truth and sign the divorce papers." I was in shock, literally couldn't understand what had just happened or why my husband had humiliated me that way in front of all our people. The next day, around 11 inches the morning, someone knocked on the hotel room door. I was awake but without energy for anything, with Noah watching cartoons on the tablet, and when I asked who it was, I heard Christopher's voice saying, "It's me. Please open up." The first thing I thought was, he has the nerve to come here after what he did. But also a part of me wanted answers, so I opened the door. Christopher was there with Jennifer right behind him, and both had this expression I couldn't decipher. Christopher entered without waiting for an invitation and said, "Hannah, we need to talk." And I responded, "Oh, now you want to talk?" after humiliating me in front of everyone. Jennifer closed the door and leaned against it with her arms crossed, while Christopher sat on the bed like nothing was wrong. He looked at me and said with an uncomfortable smile, "Okay, listen. What happened yesterday was a joke. I mean, a prank. We were playing around." I looked at him like he had gone crazy and said, "A joke? Accusing me of infidelity in front of all our family and friends is a joke?" Jennifer laughed nervously and added, "Oh, Hannah, don't be so dramatic. It was just to see the reactions. Everyone does it on TikTok. It was supposed to be funny." I felt rage consuming me and yelled at them, "This wasn't funny. You destroyed me." Noah was crying. "Everyone thinks I'm a cheater, and you say it was a joke." Christopher tried to take my hands, but I pulled away, and he said, "I'm sorry, okay? It got out of hand. We didn't think you'd take it so seriously. Let's go home and fix it." Something about the way he said it didn't add up. If it had really been a stupid prank, Christopher would be more remorseful, more desperate to genuinely apologize, but his body language was like someone acting a poorly rehearsed role. And Jennifer, well, she didn't look sorry at all. Like she had this annoyed expression as if I was the one overreacting. I told them I needed time to think. that I wasn't going back to the house that day, and that if they wanted to fix things, they'd have to start by calling all yesterday's guests and explaining to them that it was a cruel lie. Christopher nodded and said he would, that he'd call everyone, and they left, leaving me more confused than before because none of this made sense. I spent 2 more days at the hotel, trying to process everything while my parents took care of Noah because I didn't want him in the middle of this chaos. I decided to go back to the house on Tuesday to talk to Christopher more calmly and understand what the hell had really happened. When I arrived, he wasn't there. He had left a note saying he had to go out, for work, and Jennifer wasn't there either. I took the opportunity to search the house looking for, I don't know what, some clue as to why they had done something so sick. And that's when I decided to do something I would normally never do. Check our bank accounts. Christopher always handled them, and I trusted blindly, but after what happened on Saturday, that trust was destroyed. I got into Christopher's computer. The password was Noah's birthday, so it wasn't hard, and opened the bank's website. I checked the savings account and almost had a heart attack when I saw the balance. We had like $80,000 saved 6 months ago, and now only $12,000 remained. I thought there was some error, but I checked the history and there were huge transfers of $5,000, $8,000, $10,000, leaving our account regularly since January. I also found statements for a credit card I didn't know existed, in Christopher's name, with a debt of almost $40,000 for purchases and cash withdrawals that I never authorized or knew were made. My heart was racing and I felt like I was going to throw up, not just from pregnancy but from the shock of discovering our accounts had been drained. I kept investigating and found a folder on the computer called Jennifer Docs that had bank transfer files. I opened them and saw that Christopher had been sending Jennifer money, direct transfers from our account to hers, with notes that said things like, "For the M matter," or "Covering the problem," or simply with no note. I added up all the transfers and it was over $100,000 that had left our money in the last 6 months straight to Jennifer. At that moment, everything started to make sense in the most twisted way possible. Jennifer's sudden move into our house, the time they spent locked in the office, the whispered conversations, the public infidelity accusation that had no proof. It was all a distraction. They were robbing us. Or rather, Christopher was using our money for something related to Jennifer, and they had publicly accused me of cheating, so that when I discovered the fraud, they could say, I was the bad one, the liar, the one who didn't deserve credibility. It was so elaborate and so cruel, I couldn't believe it. I took photos of everything, screenshots of the accounts, of the transfers, of the secret credit card statements, and saved them on my phone and in the cloud just in case. Then I searched for more information and found emails between Christopher and Jennifer, where they talked about M, who I assumed was Michael, Jennifer's supposed ex. In one of the emails, Jennifer said something like, "M is asking too many questions. We need more time." And Christopher responded, "I already sent you another $15K. That should keep you going until we figure out how to solve this." In another more recent email, Jennifer wrote, "If Hannah discovers something, we can use Plan B. We already have everything set up to make her look like she's the problematic one." I felt like I'd been kicked in the stomach. Not only had they robbed and humiliated me, but they had planned it all meticulously. Plan B was the infidelity accusation, a way to destroy my reputation so no one would believe me if I discovered the fraud. I sat on the floor of Christopher's office, crying but also with a determination I didn't know I had, because if they thought I was going to stay quiet while they destroyed me to cover their crimes, they were very wrong. I decided I needed more information before confronting them, so I looked for Michael's contact, Jennifer's supposed ex-partner. I found him on LinkedIn and sent him a message explaining who I was and asking if we could talk about Jennifer. He responded in less than an hour saying yes, that actually he was also looking for information about her, and we agreed to meet at a coffee shop that same afternoon. Michael turned out to be a guy about 35 years old, very professional and evidently stressed. He told me that Jennifer had been his partner in a consulting firm for 3 years, and that about 6 months ago, he had started noticing irregularities in the company's accounts. According to Michael, Jennifer had been diverting client money to personal accounts, creating false invoices and charging for services that were never provided. When he confronted her in February, she denied everything and threatened to sue him for harassment and defamation if he kept investigating. Michael hired a forensic accountant who confirmed that Jennifer had stolen around $200,000 from the company over a period of a year and a half, and he was in the process of filing criminal charges against her. He told me Jennifer had disappeared in March, that she wasn't answering calls or emails, and that he assumed she had fled with the money. I told him what I had discovered about the transfers from Christopher, and Michael almost fell off his chair. He explained that it made sense, that Jennifer needed money to cover her expenses while evading the legal consequences of what she had done, and that she probably convinced Christopher to help her by telling him some lie about why she needed the cash. I asked him why Jennifer had told everyone that Michael had cheated on her, and he laughed bitterly, saying, "Because I'm easier to demonize than to explain she's a criminal, I guess." Michael gave me copies of the documents his lawyer had prepared about the fraud case and told me he'd be willing to testify about what Jennifer had done if I needed legal support. I went back home with all this information, feeling like a private detective but also completely devastated because my husband, the father of my child and the baby I was expecting, had chosen to help his criminal sister instead of protecting his own family. That night when Christopher arrived, he acted like nothing was wrong, asked me how I felt, if I was ready to leave the drama behind and get back to normal. I played along and told him, yes, that I wanted things to be okay again, and he seemed relieved. Jennifer came down from her room and the three of us had dinner in an uncomfortable silence while I thought about how I was going to expose them. I decided I wasn't going to do this privately. They had humiliated me publicly, so I would do the same. But unlike them, I had the truth on my side. I organized a family meeting 2 days later, on Friday, telling everyone I wanted to clear things up about what had happened at the party and that I needed everyone to be present. I invited my parents, Christopher's parents, my brother, and I also invited Michael without telling anyone who he was. Christopher and Jennifer didn't know I had discovered everything, so they agreed to the meeting, thinking it was going to be me apologizing or something. Friday arrived and everyone was in our house's living room. Christopher and Jennifer looked confident. My parents looked worried. Christopher's parents looked uncomfortable, and Michael was standing near the door as I had asked him. I started by saying, "Thank you all for coming. I know what happened last week was horrible, and everyone deserves to know the real truth." Christopher interrupted me, saying, "Hannah, we already talked about this. It was a silly joke. It's over." And I raised my hand to silence him. I said, "It wasn't a joke, Christopher. It was a planned distraction to cover up the fact that you and Jennifer have been committing financial fraud using our family's money." The silence was absolute. Christopher went pale and Jennifer immediately said, "What are you talking about? You're crazy." I took out my phone and projected on the TV the screenshots of the bank transfers, the emails between them, the secret credit card statements, and while everyone watched the evidence, I explained everything, from the disappearance of $80,000 from our savings to the transfers of over $100,000 to Jennifer, to the emails planning to use a false infidelity accusation as cover if I discovered something. Jennifer stood up, screaming that I had made it all up, that I had forged the documents. But then Michael stepped forward and said, "Hello, Jennifer. Long time no see." Jennifer's face went from red to completely white in 2 seconds. Michael introduced himself to the rest of the family as Jennifer's ex-business partner and explained that she had stolen $200,000 from their company, that there were pending criminal charges against her, and that apparently she had used Christopher and our family to finance her escape from justice. He showed the legal documents his lawyer had prepared, and everything fit perfectly with what I had discovered. Christopher's mom started crying, saying, "Jennifer, how could you?" And Christopher's dad yelled at his son, asking if he knew what he was getting his family into. Christopher tried to defend himself, saying Jennifer had told him Michael was extorting her, that she needed money to protect herself legally, that he just wanted to help his sister. But nobody believed him anymore. My mom hugged me, asking forgiveness for doubting me even for a second after the party, and my dad told Christopher he was a disgrace and hoped he would face legal consequences for what he had done. Jennifer tried to leave, but Michael told her he had already notified the authorities of her location and that there would probably be an arrest warrant being issued soon. She yelled at all of us, calling us traitors, and left the house, slamming the door. Christopher stayed there, sitting with his head in his hands, repeating, I'm sorry, I didn't want things to go this far." But his apologies sounded empty and pathetic. His parents took him out of the house because they didn't want him near me at that moment, and the rest of my family stayed with me, making sure I was okay. That night, I went to my parents' house with Noah and didn't go back. I couldn't be in that house that no longer felt like mine, surrounded by memories of a life that had been a lie. The following days were a blur of calls with lawyers, with the bank trying to recover some of the stolen money. 2 at the police, because Michael formally filed his complaint, and I also filed mine for the unauthorized use of our joint accounts. Christopher called me every day asking for forgiveness, sending me long messages explaining that Jennifer manipulated him, that he thought he was doing the right thing helping his sister, that he never wanted to hurt me. Jennifer, on the other hand, sent me completely different messages, insults saying I was a vindictive bitch who had destroyed her family, that how dare I bring in Michael when she was just trying to survive, that she hoped my baby would be born knowing her mother was a traitor. The messages were so vile that my lawyer advised me to save them all as evidence and consider a restraining order. I responded to her only once, saying that if she contacted me again, I would take legal action, and surprisingly, she stopped writing. Last week, I finally told Christopher, I want a divorce. I'm 5 months pregnant, living with my parents, trying to explain to Noah why we don't live with Daddy anymore, and processing the fact that the man I planned my life with turns out to be a liar and accomplice to fraud. Christopher cried when I told him, begged me to give him another chance, said he'd go to therapy, that he'd work to recover the money, that he'd do anything. But I don't feel anything for him anymore, except disappointment and sadness for what could have been. As for Jennifer, it turns out Michael was right about the criminal charges. She was arrested a few days ago for fraud and embezzlement, and according to Michael's lawyer, she'll probably face several years in prison if found guilty. Part of me feels satisfaction that she's facing consequences. But another part just feels tired, because none of this should have happened. Christopher will probably also face charges for his participation, although lesser ones because technically it was his money he was transferring. But the bank is investigating the credit card fraud, and things don't look good for him either. My parents have been incredible. They're supporting me completely, and have already prepared a room for me and another for the baby when she's born. Noah is adapting little by little. Although sometimes he asks when we're going back home, and I don't know what to tell him because this is our home now. Yesterday, he asked me if his little sister is going to meet Daddy, and I told him, yes, that Daddy will always be his daddy no matter where we live, but inside I wonder how I'm going to handle co-parenting with someone who betrayed me so deeply. I guess I'll figure it out with time. I mean, it's not like I have many options. The hardest thing has been rebuilding my reputation after that public infidelity accusation, although I've already explained the truth to everyone who was at the party and many have apologized for believing Christopher. The gossip spread, and I know there are people who still think there must be some truth to those accusations. I've stayed away from social media because I don't have the energy to deal with comments from people who don't know the whole story. And I'm focusing on my pregnancy and on Noah, which is what really matters now. Sometimes I wonder if there were signs I didn't see, if I was naive for trusting Christopher so much, if I should have questioned why Jennifer was really staying with us for so long. But then I remind myself that none of this is my fault, that I did nothing wrong except love and trust the wrong people, and that what's important now is to move forward and build a stable life for my children. My baby is going to be born in 4 months, and by then I hope to have at least the divorce process advanced, if not finished. Although my lawyer says these things take time, especially when there's financial fraud involved. The truth is, I still haven't fully processed that my marriage ended this way. It wasn't due to lack of love or irreconcilable differences, but because my husband chose his criminal sister over his own family and thought he could get away with publicly humiliating me to cover his lies. And the worst part is that if I hadn't decided to check the accounts, I'd probably still be living in ignorance while they kept robbing us and planning who knows what else. That's what hurts most, the level of deception and manipulation all this required, the number of times Christopher looked me in the eyes and lied without blinking. But well, here I am, pregnant, with a 6-year-old child, living with my parents at 29 like I'm 19 again, but at least I'm surrounded by people who genuinely love and support me, and that has to be enough for now, I guess.